Well, let's go ahead. It's 5 o'clock here, and so let's go ahead. I want to welcome everyone who has joined us for this new features live webinar. We do these not every month, but typically every couple months when we have something new to show. And as we mentioned to those who had already joined, we have a new feature that's coming out on all platforms and actually already is out on the web app. So if you use RoofSnap at app.roofsnap.com, you've already seen this feature. Here in the next few days, we will be releasing it on iOS, and today we're going to show you on an iPad this new imagery feature. Let's go ahead, since people have just joined and we're a minute in, I do want to remind you that we have a chat. So if you have any questions during this webinar, please go ahead and ask in the chat. We'll check that chat towards the end and see if we can answer any questions.
Yes.
And our producer, Josh, we want to thank him for kind of running things behind the scenes today, and he'll be sending you a chat welcome message here if he hasn't already. Katrina, why don't we go ahead and transition right on into the iPad screen?
Yes, please.
Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
All right. So here we go. And we're still down here in the corner. All right, Katrina. So I suppose I should just start with a DIY project.
Yeah.
Because this is going to apply to the drawing it yourself functionality within RoofSnap. So we'll go ahead as we normally would and just start a new project from the main screen. And I'm going to select our demo office. You may only have the sample office or just your primary company office, but go ahead and obviously just put it into which office makes sense for your company. And there we go.
Giving away the keyword.
It's a sneak peek. And I've got an address in mind here.
All right, filling out the details. This is when I tell my jokes,
Yeah,
right?
I can't talk and type at the same time. My multitasking skills are limited to verbal and nonverbal separately. All right, so that's all we need to get a project going is just an address. We do recommend, of course, putting in the zip if you know it. It does help pinpoint that specific house.
Yep.
And we're going to go right into the sketch screen here. So I'm going to tap on sketch, and it's going to find that address. That's the geocoding process there. And we can zoom in on the house. We can make sure that we are on the right location. Every once in a while, geolocation, which is a third-party service for us that actually puts that little red pin right there at the address. Sometimes it'll put it towards the back of the yard or on the street or maybe a little closer to the neighbor's house. So you will want to move the map over at this stage to make sure that you're centered in on the roof that you want to draw.
Yep.
Now, what we're about to show you has to do with this confirm location button in the upper right-hand corner. But I do want just to remind any user who's joined us today who does want to use Apple imagery on an iPad
Yes.
or use their NearMap subscription, because some of you have had a NearMap subscription and you want to access that imagery direct, that is always going to be down here in the Change Map section, just like it always is.
Yep.
So if you're going to access your own personal NearMap subscription, you can tap on that. If you want to check out the Apple flyover imagery, you're going to access it from the Change Map down there. But once you've got that location, now instead of having that NearMap purchase button up here in the upper right hand corner, we have a confirm location button. Let's go ahead and tap it and see what happens. And this is the exciting part, ladies and gentlemen.
Ta-da.
So the reason we centered in on that house is because we're going to pull thumbnails of all the available imagery. Now this is going to include your standard definition imagery, which is the first option here on the left. And that is the imagery that may or may not have leaf coverage, may or may not be straight down, may or may not have heavy shadows, or be completely obscured by the canopy.
Right.
If you're in a very wooded location, that standard definition satellite imagery may not be ideal.
And just to kind of clarify here, Jason, so previous to this, and currently, I guess, on our iOS platform.
Until a few more days,
Yep. You wouldn't be able to see all of this information. So there are little dates on some of these images, right?
Yeah.
And you can see all these thumbnails on the front end.
So that's kind of the functionality here that we want to bring to you as the user. High resolution imagery, it costs $5, and it's near map, and before you would see available dates.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on where you are in the world, that available date, perhaps like this first one here, 3/3 of 2018, that first near map image, well, that's an early spring image, and in Columbus, Ohio, I know that that means the leaves are off the trees. They haven't come back yet. And depending upon your region, dates might have been good enough for you to go, okay, I see that they have a date during the spring or the winter. There's going to be no leaves on the trees, so I'll go ahead and roll the dice and buy a near map image.
Sure.
But this is better. And the reason this is better is you can actually scroll through and see all of the available recent near map images going back 3 years for this particular address,
Nice.
and get an idea of what's available before you commit to any purchase.
Yes.
Now, some people ask, and Katrina, so I'll ask you, what are the benefits of using high resolution imagery to sketch the roof instead of just your standard imagery option?
Absolutely. I would say what comes foremost in my thoughts are accuracy, really. Seeing the lines of the roof very clearly, being able to sketch over those, seeing the gutter lines to get right in the middle of that gutter line for nice, accurate, and easier sketching.
Absolutely. From the testing that I've done and many of our customers have done, we're within 1% when the roof is sketched accurately from a near map image, where it's more like within 3% of production values when you use what I call the standard definition imagery or satellite imagery.
Sure.
All right, so the next question before we select which of these near map images we want to import into the project, because once we select an image, that is the image. That will be the $5 purchase price, and that will be loaded in, and there will be no going back. So let's ask ourselves a few questions. For any of you who fly a drone, you know that in order to capture the best image of the house, you want to be directly overhead.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be 5 degrees off center in any direction, or even 10 degrees off center. You want to be straight overhead.
Right.
That top-down view, which Nearmap usually has at least 1 or 2 very good top-down view options, means limited distortion. You may have noticed you've drawn a hipped roof, and the hip on one side is 26 feet and the hip on the other side is 29 feet. When actually, if you centered it, if the image was perfectly straight down, both of them are probably somewhere around 28.2 or 28.3 feet.
Right.
That straight down, top down view is something that you can see if you look at any of these available images. Can we see any sidewalls on any of these images, Katrina?
It's not, this,
Well, all of
Nearmap
these,
did a really great job.
yeah,
on
this house, it looks like this house has top down view pretty straight on for all of them. Now,
Great.
the next issue to consider, of course, is any canopy coverage. So this second near map image in the far right-hand corner has not really any leaves on the trees, but it's taken at a time of day where those trees are casting heavy shadows on the roof.
Yep.
So that would eliminate that one as an option. This June 6th of 2017 image, that looks pretty good, even though it's not a fall or a winter or a spring image with no leaves on the trees. That house isn't obstructed by the tree. The other thing I noticed within this image is there are no heavy shadows being cast on the roof.
Right.
Whereas the March 5th image has some pretty heavy shadows there in the front. And I know, just from my experience of using Nearmap, that the newest imagery is the best imagery. Their camera systems are always getting better. Their resolution is always going up. So if I can avoid using anything that's 3 years old, if it's the only straight down image with no leaves on the trees, I'm going to use it because
Sure.
it's still going to be really nice. But if I can use the most recent image from 2018, which really looks pretty much ideal. I'm torn, Katrina. I'm torn between March 3rd of 2018 and June 2nd of 2017.
Well, let's take a look at the hips. So you had mentioned that kind of straight aerial view.
Looks like the March 3rd one might be just a little bit off center.
Yep, I'm
But
seeing that.
looks like the June 2nd one is like almost perfectly straight.
Yeah, I'd
Do
probably
you
go
agree?
with June.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, of course, when you're making this decision, it doesn't have to be as drawn out as this. Obviously, we're elaborating a little bit just to kind of give you some pointers when picking your imagery. But with just a few seconds of looking at the available thumbnails here, you're going to be able to go ahead and just tap on the available imagery option that looks best to you and then confirm your purchase at $5. It's going to load that image right into the scene.
Nice.
Now, from this point, we do have the ability to rotate, and you guys know how important it is, if you've ever used 90 mode in RoofSnap, to spend a couple seconds and just make sure that that image is nice and straight. I always start at the ridge, kind of see if I'm pretty straight on the ridge, but then I'll move down and check the eaves, and I'm not quite perfectly straight there, so let me rotate just a little bit more. And how's that look?
Looks
Pretty
good to
straight?
me,
I'll check
yeah.
one more over here.
Yeah,
Okay.
looking good.
Ridges and a couple of my eaves all look pretty good. I am zoomed in as far as I can at the moment. So I'm going to tap on the snap and start drawing button up here in the upper right hand corner. Continue. And from here it's pretty much what you're used to. I don't think we have any other changes. We're now in the sketch screen. And we don't have a lot to show you today, so I will take a few minutes and just sketch this thing out.
Yeah, let's do it.
For any of you who have any questions about sketching, you can ask questions through the chat in this live webinar,
Yes, please.
or you can always call us, 877 766 3762. It spells out RoofSnap, so 877 RoofSnap, and you can get a hold of Katrina or any of our sales and support team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you've been an existing customer or if you're just checking out RoofSnap for the first time, we offer free training. We typically do video chats, screen shares over the internet, so that way you can see exactly what you need to see for us to kind of show you how things work.
Absolutely.
Let's draw this out. So I am going to switch over into draw mode
Right.
and place my cursor on the screen. But before I draw my first line, I'm going to turn on 90 mode, which is that little button in the upper left hand corner.
Okay.
And as many of you know, 90 mode is just going to help me keep my line perfectly horizontal for that line. And I'm going to daisy chain. So I'm not going to pick up my drawing finger. I'm going to come to the edge here, and then I'm just going to draw the very next line after tapping on the screen with my thumb. Kind of use my thumb on the other side of the screen, kind of like a mouse click. So after every line. Now you don't have to outline the whole roof first. Some people prefer to do an outline of the roof, but some people prefer to do one section at a time. So let's do this section here. I can tap on facets just to make sure that things are closing in and shading in blue as I go. And Katrina, feel free to interject if you think of anything that, of course, I will forget things to talk about here.
That's all right. We all know how good at multitasking
I do my best.
But really using those cursor tails, 90 mode does a lot of that work for you. So you don't have to pay close attention to that. But when you're doing things like placing hips and things like that, or getting into some of more complex architecture, use those cursor tails to kind of guide you.
Absolutely. Katrina, one thing I want to point out here, and I'm gonna switch to edges mode and press and hold on a couple lines just to delete them, and I'm gonna draw them back in a second. But I want to talk about balancing hips, balancing rakes. You know, this image, it's pretty straight top down, but you'll notice that my hip on the left at 18.2 and my hip on the right at 18.6, it's not perfectly balanced. So I could adjust it a little bit by pressing and holding, just dropping my cursor so it sits on a point for about a second, and then when I move my finger, it'll pick up that point.
Perfect.
And if I want to get these, like, maybe not dead on, I think I need to drag this side out just a little bit further. Yeah, let's come to about right there. I like to go just a little bit past the edge, what would ultimately be the equivalent here. We can't really see, can't see the gutters that well, but let's say, roughly the center of the gutters.
Right.
Okay, and now we want 18.3, 18.3.
Perfect.
So that's a perfectly balanced hip. This really won't dynamically or dramatically impact your linear measurements when you balance the hips, but it will make for a prettier drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty drawings really are only important when you're going to be showing the measurements to a homeowner, or maybe you're going to be sending the PDF to an insurance adjuster.
Right.
So if he's going to be going off of your measurements or is willing to accept your measurements, sending them a clean, pretty drawing from RoofSnap is going to carry a lot more success than something that is crooked or messy.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, so Katrina, I'm going to keep drawing, and feel free to to weigh in
Sounds good.
on all this.
So Jason is using the pan and zoom function as he's drawing to get close in for detailed areas and things like that. If you've got something that's pretty cut up and complex, got a lot of overhang sections, or needs some smaller refinements, maybe a couple of front gables with some feet in the front, or eyebrows, or...
And that pan and zoom button is down here on the right side of the menu options along the bottom.
Yeah.
And I'm in pan and zoom now, so I can just take 2 fingers and really zoom in here.
Perfect.
You know what, let's go ahead and balance these hips while I'm here. So you notice when it picks up, those measurements get a little bit bigger, which makes it easier to see.
Yeah.
So there's 18.6, 18.6. And then 90 mode, we always have to turn 90 mode back on afterwards. And I can draw that little connector. And I just got a few little lines, like 3 lines here, 2 lines here left in the front to do. So let's come down the valley. Oh, 3 lines. I was right the first time. And 90 mode makes it so easy because it lined up. When I came down that valley, it automatically lined up with my corresponding points. So it's not just about drawing horizontal lines and vertical lines. It's also about finding other lines that are perfectly horizontal and vertical with where you're bringing your point to.
Exactly.
Once you use it, you kind of feel it. And it just makes a lot of sense once you start drawing with 90 mode turned on. So here, of course, the roof won't be fully completed. We won't have accurate surface area measurements or accurate linear measurements until we label the lines and put in pitch values.
Yep.
So let's do that real quick. Most of you are familiar with this. You've probably done it many times on your own already, but I will go ahead and just show you how I go back and forth between the line labels, and I touch on the screen in this little gray area to slide this drawer in and out. To quickly switch, I can close the drawer so it's out of my way, touch on all the hips. You noticed I bumped a valley there, so I'm going to go right back in, switch over to valleys, close the drawer, touch on those last 2 valleys. Okay, we're good?
We're good.
Hop into facets, pitch. This whole roof is a 412. We didn't pick a very difficult one for today.
We did not.
Let's keep it easy, short and sweet. And, go ahead and just tap on apply to all. That's going to put 412 on every slope. And tap on the done button. So the point of all this was, of course, the thumbnail previews of all of your imagery options. Whether you're still going to use standard definition imagery, nothing changes. You don't have to use a near map, but it is built into RoofSnap, especially for roofs that are complicated, cut up, difficult to see, and when there's tree coverage, or when your other imagery options are distorted.
Yes.
This can be the case when you are kind of getting out of the metro area and into more suburban and rural areas. That standard definition imagery it's not great. It's not going to give you very accurate measurements compared to your near map option.
Right.
Last but not least, when you are installing an asphalt product, an architectural shingle, the built-in waste calculator is going to take into account additional quantities of shingles that you will need to account for all that extra cutting that you're going to have in the valleys and at the hips and at the step walls and at the end of your runs at rake edges. And this little calculation here is coming up with 11.29. Now, some of you say, hey, 15% is the standard for hip roofs. And absolutely, if 15% is your preferred waste percentage for a roof like this, then you can easily just tap on the no button, hop into measurements, and pop that waste percentage from 10% right up to 15%.
Easy.
But I'll tell you from experience, if you're in a competitive market and you need to make sure that you're not overpricing jobs, that 11.5% would have been perfect for a standard installation job of an architectural shingle roof.
Great.
Well, Katrina, let's go ahead and just pop back over here for a minute into full screen. I want to invite you to, if you're watching this video live and you've been chatting with us, we're going to take a look at the chat here in just a second. But if you're watching this video, a few, what are we in, early September of 2018?
Yes.
So if it's not early September of 2018 and you have any questions, we of course monitor our videos on YouTube. So leave a comment. Let us know how we did today.
Yeah.
What did you think about the live webinar? What do you think about the new feature? And what do you think in general about RoofSnap? Any advice or any requests? We'd be happy to take those right through the comments here in YouTube.
Yes, please give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
Katrina, while you, let's see, I'm going to try to look at the chat here real quick. Okay, no chats.
That's all Josh.
Well, we must have done a good job.
All right.
And that's all right, but please feel free to leave us a comment if you're watching this video after the fact. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have been researching RoofSnap and you're ready to start your trial, go to app.roofsnap.com and sign up for a free 14-day trial.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any additional questions, as we mentioned before, give us a call at 877-RoofSnap.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.